Hi everyone, and welcome to our summer family evenings. It's 6 o'clock, so we're going to get started, though I expect more people are going to be trickling in. Thank you so much for being here. We are very excited to have the American International Rattlesnake Museum giving us a little tour this evening. I'm Katie Bruhl, Executive Director at the Pajarito Environmental Education Center, or PEEC, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's presentation. I want to give a huge thank you to Del Norte Credit Union for making Summer Family Evenings possible for the 6th year in a row. They have been really wonderful partners to PEEC, and we're very appreciative of them. We have Summer Family Evenings scheduled every Wednesday in June and July at 6 p.m. So visit peeknature.org to see the full list and to register for other presentations. Next week, we are going to be going in a helicopter ride over Los Alamos with Classic Air Medical, so that should be a lot of fun. We are able to offer programming tonight because of our wonderful members and donors, and I'd like to say a special thank you to our members and donors who are watching tonight. You're making this all possible. So Bob Myers is our presenter tonight. Bob Myers has been the director of the American International Rattlesnake Museum for 30 years. The museum just celebrated their 30th anniversary on May 5th. Unfortunately, it was rather a quiet celebration, but they're hoping to have a great celebration for their 31st next year. He is a former biology teacher with an excessive fondness for reptiles. His father always said that he had the only reptile gene in the family. He created the American International Rattlesnake Museum to help people overcome their fear of snakes and to spread a positive message about the importance of reptile predators. The Rattlesnake Museum is unfortunately closed temporarily for the same reason that the Nature Center and so many other places are closed, but they hope to reopen soon. And he invites you all to come visit whenever they open. So I'm going to get Bob to unmute right now and to start his video. Let's see if we can make that happen. All right. Oh, and I wanted to say one more thing, which is that when we were practicing, Bob did disconnect at one point, but we got it connected again. So don't worry about that. If he disconnects, we will get started again. So Bob, over to you. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to walk into the picture here. My lovely wife, Lorraine, is the camera person tonight. And she's got a much steadier hand than I do, so it should be a good job on her side of the camera. I want to welcome you to the Rattlesnake Museum. I'm so sorry that I'm not up there visiting with you face to face. It's always been so much fun, and to bring the animals on a field trip. But now we're going to bring you here on camera, give you a little taste. If you haven't seen a museum, give you a taste of what we have here to see, which is a lot more than I could possibly carry up to Los Alamos with me. So we'll take a little virtual tour. We'll spend most of the time with the animals and let you know that there is some artwork and artifacts that help tell the reptile story around here. We'll start with our greeter. This is AJ, our Eastern Diamondback rattlesnake. He is the largest species of rattlesnake in the world. The Eastern Diamondback can be found in the southeastern part of our country, Florida, and parts of the surrounding states, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. I'll mention right from the start that we get an awful lot of visitors to the Rattlesnake Museum, and so many feel that they have a pretty good knowledge of rattlesnakes. And I'll have someone come in from New York and tell me about their large Eastern Diamondback rattlesnakes. So I have to start by letting them know that you actually don't have that species in New York. You have the timber rattlesnake. So as long as rattlesnakes have been around, as long as we've known that they're there, we don't necessarily know which one is in our backyard. In addition, I get people from Texas in. They tell me about their sidewinders. Well, there are no sidewinder rattlesnakes in Texas. People from California tell me about their timber rattlesnakes, and that's an eastern rattlesnake and wouldn't be found in California except perhaps in a zoo. So if you'll follow me around the first corner here, sure is quiet. Okay, the next three snakes that we're going to see are New Mexico species of rattlesnakes. Starting with this little guy, it would probably take about 500 of these to equal the weight of that one eastern diamondback rattlesnake. This guy is closer to the size of a hefty pen than the size of an eastern diamondback. A beautiful snake found in the mountains of New Mexico. And in fact, 14 different New Mexico mountain peaks, mountain ranges, would house these beautiful banded rock rattlesnakes. Small guy, but a potent venom. A bite from this snake would be nothing to scoff at. I've heard of people hospitalized for 2-3 weeks from that little bite. And moving right along, we'll just pan right over to the next guy, a close cousin to the banded rock rattlesnake. This is the mottled rock rattlesnake. I hope you all are taking notes. There is a quiz at the end. This one is a New Mexico species. Most of its range is in Texas, but these can be found in the southeast corner of our state, down by Carlsbad. One of my visitors actually sent me a picture just maybe a week after they had visited the Rattlesnake Museum, and he had taken a picture of a mottled rock rattlesnake on that walkway down into the mouth of the cave. You can sure see, compared to the last one, see similar features and a similar size for this snake. Lorraine is close enough to the snake that appears quite a bit bigger, but it's probably a little under 2 feet long. It's good to see him out and active. He spends half of his time active and half of his time sitting back watching people go by. He's even got a little perch where he can rest his head, and he literally does watch things going on. Moving along to the next rattlesnake species, this too is a New Mexico species. Not to say they're only found in New Mexico. This is the black-tailed rattlesnake. They're found in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona primarily. And their range does go down into Mexico. In my opinion, one of the prettiest rattlesnakes out there. This I'd call a medium-sized rattlesnake, and you could see these in the foothills of the Sandias right here in the Albuquerque area. Very recognizable by that black mask across their face, and if you could see its tail, you guessed it, it is jet black. Some people want to know whether or not these snakes are male or female, and it's not quite so important to us unless we plan on breeding the snakes, but in general, the male snakes of the species have a slightly longer tail than the females. It's kind of easy to see that with a black tail because you can see exactly where the tail starts at that black, the end of the body, beginning of the tail where it starts and is black. Pretty snake. And moving right along, we're getting to a rattlesnake that is not a New Mexico species. This is the timber rattlesnake. He's kind of active right now. We were in his enclosure just a little while ago, picking up after him. Like all animals, they've got to eat, and the result is they make messes. And we've got to clean up. During this pandemic going on, we've had a lot more time to spend with the animals. We enjoy that, but we sure do miss the people. And I think the snakes are even starting to miss the people. The timber rattlesnake can be found basically in the eastern half of our country. Eastern Texas, eastern Oklahoma, all the way east to Vermont and far southern New Hampshire. And as far south as northern Florida. A pretty snake, they can get up to 6 feet, but it's uncommon for them to go much above 4.5 feet. Eastern diamondback, that first snake we saw, often attains a length over 5 feet. 6 feet is rare, but not unseen. In the past, the eastern diamondback tended to get to longer sizes. Now, with so many roads that run through its range, they have a hard time getting around without coming in close personal contact with cars, which ends in their death. I'm going to ask Lorraine to follow me along. With people in the museum, I often stop and tell stories about some of the artwork and artifacts, but I'm going to save that for your visit to the museum. She's going to follow me around the first corner here to the only venomous lizard we have on exhibit, the Gila monster, and the only venomous lizard in North America. She's on exhibit because of her relation to the rattlesnakes through that venom. She's 22 inches long, which is just about as long as they get. But something interesting about this animal is that she is going to turn 32 years old this year. She will have been at the Rattlesnake Museum for 30 of those years. And that's quite a long life for a lizard. Her range, the Gila monster range in our country, is the southwest corner of New Mexico, the southwest half of Arizona, far eastern California, far southern Nevada, far southwestern Utah, and then the range down into northwestern Mexico. Good. All right, moving along. I'm just not used to the museum being so quiet right now. We have videos playing in every room. It can be a noisy place around here. Taking a quick little stop here at the Globe exhibit. We have another venomous creature on exhibit here, the desert hairy scorpion. We understand you have one out there at the Nature Center, so we won't spend a lot of time with that. But do get back to that Nature Center as soon as you can. So much to see. I love that place. I've got building envy. Okay, we're going on to another New Mexico species, the western diamondback rattlesnake, the largest rattlesnake to be found in the Southwest, our part of the country. We've got 2 specimens on exhibit. The reason being is that we want to show that not every member of a species looks like every other member. The darker one you're looking at right now with kind of a greenish tinge is an interesting specimen for those of us that deal with rattlesnakes on a daily basis. He was found and studied at a university in Kansas. If you were to look up online the range map of the western diamondback, you'd see the range just barely touches into Kansas. Most of its range, most of its range is in Oklahoma, Texas, a good part of New Mexico, southern half of Arizona, far eastern California, and down into the northern, almost northern half of Mexico. A wide, wide range for a big, big snake. These are very common in New Mexico. Not the most common rattlesnake, but our largest. All right, we're going to pan over to the other one. Oh, right, we talked about the darker one. The lighter one is a New Mexico specimen. Not to say every New Mexico specimen looks like this one. I've seen western diamondback rattlesnakes in New Mexico that are nearly black. You'll be seeing one pretty soon that is almost entirely black here at the museum, but it's black for an unusual reason. You want to get in close on that face there? He's sticking his tongue out at us. Kind of curious, what's going on here? He's seen a few cameras in his day. His picture's probably been taken 100,000 times. Moving along into the next enclosure is an unusual specimen of a western diamondback. Again, the same species as you just saw, but this one, rather than having the regular diamond pattern running down its back, this one has a stripe running down the back. Really confusing a lot of people, but this is not so unusual in nature. I do have people calling me on a fairly regular basis, asking me about the rattlesnake they saw. It seemed to have no pattern at all, or just a faint stripe down the back. Can you see that well? Let's see. Yeah, that's about as close as we can come. That one's in the back corner of its enclosure right now. And on to the next enclosure. Here we've got another interesting specimen. This is not a western diamondback, and it's not a prairie rattlesnake. It's both. This was a rescued snake. Some workers on the west side of Albuquerque called us up and let us know that there was a rattlesnake on the property where they were working, and they couldn't continue their work for fear of the confrontation with a rattlesnake. So they called us up and asked us if we could remove it, and we do that all the time. So we went out, picked the snake up, brought it back, and started to look at it. We realized that it didn't have normal features for a western diamondback or a prairie rattlesnake, the two rattlesnakes that live in the area. And we pretty soon came to the conclusion that this snake had features of both and probably had parents of two different species of rattlesnake. It happens. Pretty snake. He's gotten quite large while he's been here. He's probably tripled in size. Now, for those of you that have been here before, you remember the larger room that we're in right now had lots of chairs here for watching a video. We took the chairs out. We're not going to be using them for a while because of the virus and the social distancing. So the chairs came out, and we're putting temporary enclosures through the middle of the room. We've moved about half of them in so far. A lot of the snakes have not been moved in yet, but it's that much more for you to see, that many more rattlesnake species to see while you're here. Not just rattlesnakes. We have other reptiles that we'll be showing, at least temporarily, when we get open. Okay. All right. Over in this corner of the room, we have 8 different rattlesnakes. The one that Lorraine is approaching right now is called the Northern Pacific rattlesnake. Doesn't take a whole lot of thinking to guess where this snake might be found. The northwestern part of our country, Northern California, Oregon, and Washington. It used to be in a group of rattlesnakes closely related to the prairie rattlesnake. But taxonomy, the naming of the snakes, changes all the time, and this snake has been moved to a different group. It still has the same common name, Northern Pacific rattlesnake. It just has a slightly altered scientific name. To the left of the Northern Pacific rattlesnake, we have the Southern Pacific rattlesnake. And it is found in the southern half of California and down into Mexico. Similar in appearance to the Northern Pacific and variable in the way it looks, dark, light, pattern changes from other specimens of its species. To the left of that snake, this is the southwestern speckled rattlesnake, not a New Mexico species. See if we can get a good shot of that. Beautiful pattern with all that speckling. Most of its range in this country is in Arizona. I should mention to you, and I hate to admit it, but Arizona has a greater variety of rattlesnake species than even New Mexico. But between Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California, we have the great variety of rattlesnakes. In New Mexico, 9 different rattlesnake species. Arizona, more like 18. And to the left of the southwestern speckled rattlesnake is the sidewinder of myth and legend. Sidewinder rattlesnake is one of the smallest species, and yet the stories about it would make you believe it's a mile long. A 20-inch sidewinder is a large specimen. You'll note that the scales above its eyes are raised, giving it one of its common names, the horned rattlesnake. Lorraine's very close to that snake, very close, within a couple of inches. That the snake's head that you're looking at is about the size of a dime, maybe a little smaller than a dime. Then we're going to come back to the southwestern and down one enclosure. And we'll take a look here at the Panamint rattlesnake. There she is. Each of the enclosures has a place that the snake can hide, at least partially, if it feels threatened in any way. But for the most part, like you're seeing, most of the snakes like to spend most of their time up front. It's almost like they want to take a look at people looking at them as much as we want to see the snake. Moving to the right, we've got another western diamondback rattlesnake. We've all heard of albino animals. This is just the opposite. This is a melanistic western diamondback rattlesnake with excessive pigment, a pigment called melanin that gives us most of our skin color and creates what looks like a very dark western diamondback. You might see one of these in the wild. It is not unheard of. So that's a melanistic snake. The opposite, albino, we call amelanistic. And she's kind of hidden back there, but I bet Lorraine can zoom in on her. She has a hiding place there in the shade. Albino animals are born this way in the wild now and then, but they don't do real well. All right, we're going to turn around and come down the next bank of enclosures. First greeted by the Hopi rattlesnake. He's very active right now, and he usually is. He likes to cruise around, see what's going on, explore his enclosure. And he always seems to be ready for a meal. Now he's about 20, 22 inches long, and this is a rather small species. The Hopi rattlesnake is the only close cousin to the famous prairie rattlesnake. We'll move along and see the prairie here. She is tucked up right up against the glass. So she's a little hard to see. But Lorraine, with her amazing camera ability, is getting right in there. Now, if you look at this picture right here, this is a New Mexico species of rattlesnake. In fact, its range is huge. It goes all the way up into Canada, all the way down into Mexico, and covers almost a third of this country's territory. But at the end of the tail and just before the rattle, you'll see a black band. And if you see that black band on a rattlesnake in New Mexico, it will be the prairie rattlesnake. This one has fairly strong markings we call saddle markings. Some are not so obvious. Some blend in with the background color. There's that tail. You see the black there just before the rattle. The rattle's not considered part of the tail any more than your fingernail is considered part of your finger. It grows off the end of the tail there. And next, I bet you had no idea there were so many different rattlesnake species. The most common comment as people leave the museum is, I had no idea there were so many different rattlesnakes. Why don't we get everybody to put their best guess on how many different rattlesnakes there are in the world? All of the rattlesnakes of the world, all of them live in the Americas. This is an all-American animal for sure, for sure. Rattlesnake was seen on some early American flags with that slogan, "Don't tread on me." Almost became our national symbol. I'm still pushing for it. I don't think I'm going to change people's minds at this point, but I'm trying.
I've got
This
guesses
next one.
I've got guesses going from 20 to over 200.
Okay. Has everybody got their guess in? Drum roll, please. The number is, and this does change now and then with with taxonomy and name changes, but 84 is about the best guess you can make today. This is a rattlesnake you've probably never heard about. This is called the midget-faded rattlesnake. A weird name for a little guy. In case you didn't think rattlesnakes were arboreal, here's proof. They can climb and climb fairly well. The midget-faded rattlesnake is not found in New Mexico. It's found in western Colorado, eastern Utah, just barely up into Wyoming, and just barely touching down into Arizona. A pretty little rattlesnake, very delicate looking for a rattlesnake. Now, just about every rattlesnake you've seen today so far is a North American rattlesnake species, but the one we're looking at now is from Brazil. This snake has so many different common names, but the most common names are South American rattlesnake or Brazilian rattlesnake. And here's one for you. This is the most potently venomous rattlesnake of them all. Its venom is probably 10 to 20 times the potency of a western diamondback rattlesnake. This would be a serious bite and would certainly require a trip to the hospital. Not that every other rattlesnake bite wouldn't. We suggest if you're ever bitten by a rattlesnake, head to the hospital, have it looked at. You may not know that it was a rattlesnake species, and if you're not sure, all the more reason to go get it checked out. The doctor should be able to determine whether or not it was a venomous species and how bad the bite might be. Death rate from rattlesnake bites is low, about 1 in 1,000 bites is lethal. In this country, we have 5 or 6 deaths per year. Sounds horrible, but compared with any other way you might die, it's very infrequent. I think I heard on TV this morning that something like 6 teenagers die every day in car wrecks caused by just speeding. Let's not get into cell phone use. Might get much, much higher. Okay, moving on. One of my favorite rattlesnakes, and we're back to North America primarily, North America and Mexico. This is the tiger rattlesnake. It's just recent that tiger rattlesnakes have been found in New Mexico. It's at the very least, it's very uncommon here. Most of its range is in Arizona and down into Mexico. We all hear about the Mojave rattlesnake and how potently venomous it is and how deadly it is. But if there's a rattlesnake in North America with a more dangerous bite than a Mojave rattlesnake, it would be this little tiger rattlesnake. Not a big snake. They're known for having a small head and a big rattle. Lorraine's going to move on. We're looking back south now. This is a Mexican rattlesnake called the northwestern neotropical rattlesnake, found in southwestern, doesn't make any sense, southwestern Mexico. This particular rattlesnake has a color aberration. It's not a melanistic, not albino. It's called xanthic. It has an overabundance of yellow pigment. most reptiles have three pigments, the dark melanin, and then a yellow pigment and a red pigment. This one has the melanin, but it's overshadowed by an abundance of that yellow pigment. So the snake appears to be yellow with tan markings. Those markings on a regular northwestern neotropical rattlesnake would be black. This snake, like many of the snakes here at the museum, was born in a zoo. This one at the Houston Zoo. And this snake has been here for 29 years now. This is our oldest rattlesnake. Most rattlesnakes, small species of rattlesnakes, live in captivity in a zoo setting 10 or 15 years. Large species, 15 to 20, maybe even 25 years. When you hit 30, oh, that can be compared to a human being going over 100 years in age. And the next snake, now for a brief moment, we're going to get away from rattlesnakes. This is a cousin to the rattlesnakes. It's a pit viper, just like all rattlesnakes. It's got those heat-sensitive pits in the face. But this one is actually even more closely related to our North American copperheads and water moccasins. This is a Mexican counterpart to those two snakes that lives in Mexico, eastern coastal part of the country. Pretty snake. Its venom is potent, more potent than our water moccasin or copperhead, and another snake you'd rather not be bitten by. I can hear all the comments when I say something like that. Of course, I've heard them before. All right, it's me again. And looking back at some of the new enclosures that we're bringing into the center part of this room, these two larger enclosures have pythons, more specifically ball pythons, and we have some of these snakes around for people to touch. Now, COVID-19 may change that situation for a while, but they're still amazing to look at. In this enclosure, there are two ball pythons. The one on camera right now is just as much a ball python as the other one, but it's got an aberrant pattern and color. The darker one is the normal color for this species. And he is about 4 feet long. It's not one of the large species of python. Some pythons do get up at above 20 feet in length. They might be considered dangerous just for their size and strength. But these smaller ball pythons or royal ball pythons can be purchased in a pet shop and make wonderful pets for someone thinking about a snake as a pet. Low maintenance, nothing like a cat or a dog. They eat infrequently, every week or two. A nice cool bowl of water will keep that snake going for that week or two. For people that travel a lot, airline pilots as an example, this may be the ideal pet. Let's drop down one enclosure, Lorraine, and see a few other ball pythons. That one that we're looking at is a normal pattern ball python. That one's about 2.5 feet long. Pretty coloration. I've always thought that the pattern from ball pythons may have been the inspiration for some of the camo uniforms that the military wears. Up closer here, is a ball python with a pattern called piebald. Piebald can be seen in other animals, horses, goats, pigs. A little more unusual in snakes. But something to look at. And then if we can pan way back to the left corner in the back there, we see an amelanistic or albino ball python. We can't get the albino western diamondback out to hold, but this snake is very handleable, very gentle. Ball pythons are slow moving and gentle, and a lot of people think that they even appreciate being held. I think they might like the heat of our hands. Snakes, like all reptiles, are cold-blooded, or what we call ectothermic. Their temperature is dependent on their surrounding temperatures. To warm up, they'd go out into the sun. To cool off, they'd go into the shade or into the water. So if they're cool, sitting on our warm hands might feel pretty darn good.
Bob, we do have a lot of questions coming in, so just let me know when you're ready for them.
Okay, we'll pick up the pace here a little bit. This room houses a lot of the non-venomous snakes, and I believe all of the non-venomous snakes here at the Rattlesnake Museum are New Mexico southwestern species of snake. 2 or 3 of those you have at the Nature Center there, so we won't spend a lot of time looking at that. I'll let you know that we have the 4 king snakes of New Mexico on exhibit. They're on exhibit partially because of their interaction with rattlesnakes. They actually kill rattlesnakes and eat them. Of course, the king snake needs to be larger to be able to consume the smaller snake, but they can take the bite of a rattlesnake and survive it without much problem. Moving on, a snake that I think looks an awful lot like the rattlesnakes, the hognose snake. There are different species of hognose snake. We'll take a quick look at the nose and move on. That turned up nose gives it its name, the pig snake. No, the hognose snake. And a quick look to your right, Lorraine. We've got somebody wanting to take a closer look at us. This is a snapping turtle, the common snapper. And this one can be found in New Mexico, southern part of the state. Here at the museum, this is a big fish eater. We'll skip a couple snakes down there and move on. How about a quick look down here? There is a small group of rattlesnakes known as the pygmy rattlesnakes. There are 6 rattlesnakes in that group. We have one in New Mexico called the desert. Can you get that on there? Okay. It's hard to squeak into some of these areas to get a good look at the snake. But the desert Massasauga rattlesnake lives in our part of the country. What you're looking at here is the western Massasauga, which lives east of New Mexico, mostly in Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. This is a cousin to the desert Massasauga, our pygmy rattlesnake. You'll be seeing the desert Massasauga in just a moment. All right. Quick look. Some of the species of rattlesnake are small or they're young specimens. This is the Grand Canyon rattlesnake. It'll grow larger. This one's about 18 inches. It'll get up to about 3 feet. A little hard to get some of these snakes on camera. The glare of the glass is a problem. Okay, come on around this way. Another one of the pygmy rattlesnakes here is the dusky pygmy rattlesnake from Florida and southern Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. A common snake in that range. And as small as it is, only maybe 18, 20 inches, it sure is feisty. We'll take a quick look here because this is such a pretty snake, the gray banded king snake. I don't believe there's one at the Nature Center. I may be wrong about that. One of the 4 species of king snake to be found in New Mexico. And here is our little desert Massasauga rattlesnake. So small. This one is nearly full grown and is only maybe, a foot, 14 inches long. Two more. We're going to have to leave some out tonight. You're just going to have to come here and see the rest. We'll do 2 more here. This is the red diamond rattlesnake, not to be confused with the eastern diamondback or the western diamondback. Its name is red diamond rattlesnake, not diamondback. Pretty snake found in the southwest corner of California and all the way down through Baja. And last but not least, the infamous Mojave rattlesnake. The one we have on exhibit right now is an interesting specimen. It's got a stripe running down its back, halfway down the back, and then the regular pattern picks up. Very unusual. Hidden down in the grass there. Can you see bits and pieces of it? Let's get down a little bit lower. There we go. A little bit lower yet, and we can start to see more of that snake. The Mojave rattlesnake is credited for being one of the more potently venomous snakes. It doesn't have a worse attitude like a lot of people will state, and it's only found in the far southwestern corner of New Mexico. No other places within New Mexico, just down there near Lordsburg. And its range is mostly in Arizona and Mexico. So we could go on and on and on and on. There's a lot more to see. Great Steve Irwin Memorial. We loved old Steve. For those kids out there that didn't know Steve, parents, you got to educate those kids. He was a wonderful guy that brought a lot of attention to our dear reptiles. So let's take some questions.
All right, Bob, this was so cool to see the snakes really up close, which we couldn't have done in person. Like, it was a new experience, so thanks for that. So the first question is a many-part question. Can you describe the life cycle of a rattlesnake? Are they live birthed or hatched? What do they eat when they're babies? Does mama snake care for them? How do they mate?
Good questions, all of them. They do mate like most animals. It's sexual, and there is a male and female of the species. Rattlesnakes are among the group of snakes that are born alive. About 30% of snakes are born alive, where 70% are hatched from eggs. The live bearers include most of the pit vipers, like the rattlesnake, most of the vipers for that matter, the boa family, and the garter snakes. Egg layers would include the cobra family and the pythons and most of the non-venomous snakes. So when they're born alive. If we have births here at the museum, it can be a nice surprise coming in the morning and finding new little baby snakes. The size and number of babies is determined by the size of the female. A large female can produce more babies, and the babies will average larger size. Of course, the larger the snake species, the larger the babies. Baby snakes will eat what they can get in their mouth. Later on, they're going to become rodent feeders in most cases, or bird feeders, or both. When they're young, though, they might eat insects. Centipedes, quite a few other animals that they can eat, get into their mouth when they're that young. Here at the museum, we get in food for the animals frozen. We get in frozen mice and rats of different sizes. Small snakes, baby snakes, usually can eat a baby mouse, very small. The largest of the snakes, like the eastern diamondback, might take a big rat, a foot long without the tail, very large food. If the snake is too small to take even a baby mouse, here at the museum, they might eat a mouse part. Hope nobody's eating right now, but the mice are frozen when they arrive here. We can actually sever a leg or a tail with a razor blade very easily and prepare that as a meal for a tiny little snake. Some of the smallest babies will be the sidewinders. We've had quite a few born here at the museum. We try not to let that happen anymore. It's fun and they're cute, but we've got to find homes for them. And that means another zoo in most cases that needs that species. Now we only produce babies if there's a need for that particular species of snake.
Wow.
Another question.
All right, so a couple people have asked if it's true that you can estimate the age of a rattler by the number of segments on the tail.
No, that's not true. Here at the museum, I'll have Lorraine come a little bit closer so she can see, you can see in the camera, our rattlesnake trivia quiz. And if she moves in real close to the number one question in the upper left, it is the same question that was just asked. Can you, here it's a true false. You can tell the age of a rattlesnake by counting the segments. And the answer is, it's not true. A rattlesnake gets a new segment. We don't want to look at the rest of this, or they're not going to listen to me. They get a new segment on their rattle every time they shed their skin. For a young snake, a young rattlesnake, that can be 4 to 6 times in the first year. So a 1-year-old rattlesnake may have as many as 7 segments. Now you might think I added wrong there. They're born with what's called a pre-button. Looks like the first segment of the rattle. 6 sheds in that year would add 6 additional segments, leaving that 1-year-old rattlesnake with 7 total segments. If you were to guess by the rattle that it was 7 years old, you'd already be off by 6 years. Then at the other end of the equation, as the snake ages and the rattle ages, it becomes brittle and pieces start to chip and crack and break off. Rattle segments actually break off the end of the rattle. It's usually the older segments that break off, but once in a while a snake will snag that rattle on a rock or a branch and pull off even the entire rattle. It'll still have the base segment and what they call the matrix at the end of the tail that produces the subsequent rattle segments, but a 10-year-old rattlesnake could be seen with no segment at all. If you guessed it was 0 years old, you'd be wrong. So you can't tell the age at all, and that is the number one myth about snakes. I see people here at the museum all the time counting. They're standing at a cage with a snake, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and I know what they're doing right away. So I walk over there and I tell them what I've told you. And they're surprised to hear that because more people believe that to be true than not. The second most common myth or category in the rattlesnake trivia quiz, about baby rattlesnakes being born alive. We know that now. There are so many of these. I think we might have these on our website, which we're about to change out. You might check that out. But when you come to the museum, we also have a copy of this that you can take with you. 24 true-false questions that answer a lot of the myths and misinformation about rattlesnakes.
That's
Another
great.
question?
Yeah. So somebody is wondering if there is a specific characteristic of a Western diamondback that will determine that it is in fact that species.
Yes, several, as a matter of fact. First of all, you need to be standing in its range. A lot of people will tell us about a snake that they saw and they want us to identify it. My first question for them is, where were you when you saw this snake? That narrows things down quite a bit. Next, with a Western diamondback rattlesnake, we talk about its tail. It's got a tail that is black and white banded, bright white, jet black bands repeated just on the tail segment, not on the body of the snake, but from where the tail begins to the tip of the tail, black and white bands. If you're in its range, it's probably going to be a Western diamondback. The Western diamondback range overlaps with the Mojave, and the Mojave with the red diamond rattlesnake. Those two have black and white bands too, but the white and black bands of the Mojave rattlesnake are a little bit different in their pattern. The white bands are wider than the black, at least twice the width, where the black and white bands of the Western diamondback are more equal, white, black, white, black. The Western diamondback is also a big snake. If you're in New Mexico or in the Southwest and you see a snake over 4 feet long, that alone is enough to tell you it's probably a Western diamondback. Most rattlesnakes don't get that large.
Okay, next question, perhaps the most terrifying question of the evening. Are there any types of flying rattlesnakes?
No, there aren't. A snake might fall out of a tree. That's as close as they come to flying. There are what some people call flying snakes. They don't really fly either, but they'll kind of catch a little bit of a breeze and coast to the ground, but they don't fly either.
Okay, good.
No flying.
Good to know. Someone wants to know, what should you do if you come across a rattler while you're hiking? Run away, be still, move slowly, and does it matter if it's rattling or not?
That's a wonderful question because it does happen once in a while, and I'd like to think people are prepared for an encounter with wildlife. We all know what we should do if we see elk, as an example. We know not to get too close. If we do, we're either going to scare them away or tick them off, and they're going to come after us. Same with the snakes. Snakes are certainly, we hear that they're more afraid of us. They certainly are. We're so much bigger than they are. If we get too close, we're going to make them nervous. Rattlesnakes tend not to run away, but to sit and prepare to defend themselves. They're not a very fast-moving snake, so they can't get away so easily. Some non-venomous snakes, like our bull snakes, are faster moving and tend to be the ones to run from us, where a rattlesnake will sit still. I tell people that are hikers, avid hikers and campers, to give the snake distance, respectful distance, 10, 15 feet at least, whatever makes you comfortable too, and get a good picture. Almost everybody's got a phone in their pocket now. They can take a picture of what they've seen. When people come into the museum asking me all the time about the snake they saw, it used to be that they try to describe it to me, and that didn't go very well People see colors and patterns differently. But when they can show me a picture on their phone, if it's reasonably close, I can certainly ID the snake for them. But don't get too close. When people ask me if I'm not afraid of the snakes that I work with, I say no, but I respect them probably more than anybody out there. I know of the danger. I've seen the results. I've visited so many people in the hospital. While it's not lethal, it's certainly not pleasant. The pain and swelling can be severe, and you sure don't want to repeat that. So give the snake distance. So many people are bitten too, trying to injure the snake. They might be poking at it, trying to kill it or catch it. And a lot of those people are bitten. That could have been prevented by giving that snake the respect I'm talking about.
Great. Are you okay with answering more questions? We still have more coming.
Yeah, I've got to be out of here by midnight though, okay?
Okay, we'll do our best. Someone wants to know, how are pit vipers related to copperheads?
They're one and the same. Copperheads and water moccasins and rattlesnakes are all pit vipers, a subgroup of the larger viper group. Dividing that large viper group into two smaller groups, we're looking at pit vipers and we're looking at true vipers. In the pit vipers, the animals with those extra heat-sensitive pits in their face, that around here is going to include the rattlesnakes, copperheads, and water moccasins. We have no true vipers in our country. Most of them can be found in Africa and Asia. Snakes, you may have heard the names of things like the gaboon viper, the puff adder, the Russell's viper, the saw-scaled viper, and on and on and on. And in general, the true vipers are more dangerous animals than our pit vipers. Here in the United States, we think of the rattlesnake as being the worst possible nightmare. But as you study snakes a little while, you find out among the venomous snakes, the rattlesnakes are probably some of the least dangerous snakes to people. I told you before, we might average 5 deaths in a year from venomous snakes in our country, but a country like India with cobras, very dangerous, and true vipers, also dangerous, they might experience 10 or 20,000 deaths in 1 year. The most dangerous snakes in India are that Russell's viper. If you're taking notes and want to look these up, the Russell's viper is an incredibly beautiful snake, pretty right up to the minute you die from its bite. The saw-scaled viper, very small snake, but probably kills more people in India than the other two, the third snake being the Indian cobra. The snake in Africa that causes more deaths is the puff adder. It's a large, fat-bodied viper, but its colors blend in so well that people step on it. In the Americas, the snake that causes more deaths is called the fertile ants. We don't have it in the United States. It's a pit viper, related, a cousin to the rattlesnakes, that lives Central and South America. In our country, the snake that causes more deaths than any other snake is the western diamondback. But it's probably because we come in contact with it more frequently. If you know about the rattlesnake roundups where they gather them up and kill them, a lot of those guys fiddling around with the western diamondbacks are bitten and leading to death every once in a while. The western diamondback is considered dangerous because of its size, more so than its venom potency, where the Mojave rattlesnake and the tiger rattlesnake have very potent venoms. Not so much with the western diamondback, but he's a big snake. The eastern diamondback, very dangerous, again, because of its size, the length of the fangs, the volume of venom that is carried by those snakes.
Wow, okay. Our next question is, do snakes have personality? Do they respond to you or like to play?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. My background is in biology, and I mentioned that because that probably leads me to my beliefs here. And I save the word personality for persons, for people. I don't even describe a dog as having a personality, but they act, all animals seem to act and react differently, especially around people. We're a dangerous critter ourselves, and animals seem to recognize that. That being said, there are snakes that are more tolerant of our handling. We turn those into pets, like the ball python. They almost enjoy the warmth of our hands and tolerate, at the very least, tolerate our handling. They might even sit in your lap while you watch TV. I hear a lot of people say that they think their snake likes them, and maybe likes them more than they like any other human being. And I like to hear those comments because I assume that that person is going to take better care of a snake that likes them back. I'm not so sure the emotion is there with a snake, but they do tolerate or not tolerate our handling, and that may be interpreted as personality. There are snakes that, even non-venomous snakes, that don't make good pets. Some of the large pythons, far too large, far too strong, and somewhat unpredictable to have as a pet. Only the most seasoned reptile keeper should be keeping those big Burmese pythons, reticulated pythons, rock pythons, just too dangerous. Same thing goes for venomous snakes. Unless you've been working with snakes for a long, long time, I definitely tell you to stay away from them. People that want to keep venomous snakes and ask me how they get started, I ask them if they've kept snakes, non-venomous snakes. And if they say no, I say, please keep a non-venomous snake for 10 years. Every time it gets loose from its enclosure, imagine that that's the rattlesnake that you want to keep as a pet. It's unnerving and very dangerous. Snakes do look for a way out. They may not have a personality, but they've got energy, and they'll spend some time looking for an escape route. Makes a venomous snake a dangerous animal. Okay.
Oh, okay. Someone wanted to know in what part of New Mexico you can find the turtle that you showed us.
Okay, mostly the southern part of the state, but it comes up the Rio Grande as far north, I believe, as Albuquerque. So they can be found right outside of Albuquerque. I don't believe they're as far north as Los Alamos. We'd all have to look at a range map to catch up on the exact range of the common snapping turtle, but it is common throughout a good part of the country. We're part of the westernmost part of its range. Very common back east, especially southeast.
All right.
If you want to compare it to another interesting turtle, you can look up the alligator snapping turtle. It's not so common, but it's a lot larger, the largest freshwater turtle in the country. Something else you can look up later on.
All right, someone wants to know what that skull is behind you.
That is a sea serpent. They're washed up on the beach of California. Okay, no, it's not a sea serpent, but I pulled that one on the kids. It's actually a giraffe, and the entire cervical skeleton runs from way up there down to the floor. His chin is a little above my head, and the bottom of his neck touches almost to the floor. If you've seen some of the cute movies about sea serpents, you might imagine this could be a sea serpent with horns. You know, it's interesting that somebody saw that behind me. Some people that come to the museum get so fixated on the snakes, the animals here, that they don't even notice that the giraffe is there, as big as it is. We might get talking about other animals, and giraffes come up, and I say, what did you think of the giraffe skeleton? And they say, well, what giraffe skeleton? We didn't see that. And that'll be part of a future exhibit. It's going to be a surprise. A few other skulls hanging out here that'll be part of that exhibit. Thanks for noticing.
That's great. All right, someone wants to know, how do you tell how old a rattlesnake is?
Yeah, not so easy. For us at the museum, we have birth dates on so many of the snakes. We know the day they were born. If they were born at another zoo, there's records kept of that. And if we have snakes born, of course, we have records on that. If you know a species, Western Diamondback as an example, you might have an idea of how large the snake is on average after 1 year of growth. They might be born at 1 foot in length. After 1 year, they might be 2 feet. This is a snake that's fed well, but not overfed, a wild snake. And a 2-year-old rattlesnake might be 3 feet. A 3-year-old rattlesnake might be 4 feet, as an example. So you can estimate by the total size of the snake, a wild snake, as to its age. But once it gets up to 4 or 5 feet, it's hard to tell because the growth slows down. A 5-foot rattlesnake may be an extremely well-fed 5-year-old. Captive snakes tend to be better fed than wild snakes. But in the wild, a 5-year-old rattlesnake could be, a 5-foot rattlesnake could be 5 years old, or it could be 15 years old. Then you start looking at the rattle. This is hard. I told you can't tell the age of a rattlesnake by counting the segments, but you get a clue as to the age by looking at the edges of the rattle. This small snake produces small rattle segments. As the snake gets larger, the segments get larger. And a 1 or 2-year-old rattlesnake might have a complete rattle down to that first rattle he started with, and it may be shaped like this. But as the pieces start breaking off and the snake attains a larger size, the width of the rattle becomes more constant. So an older rattlesnake might have parallel edges to the rattle, and the rattle may look beat up. A rattlesnake may have scars, giving us the impression that it's a little bit older. But the truth is, with wild rattlesnakes, large sizes, adult sizes, it's not so easy to tell.
All right, we have the next question is from a 6-year-old girl, and she would like to know, how many scales does a snake have on its body?
Well, I've got a challenge for that 6-year-old. I would like her to come to the Rattlesnake Museum. We've got the skin of a rattlesnake on the wall so that we can actually see what it feels like. It was donated by a good friend. His wife actually prepared it so that we could touch it. And I would like that 6-year-old to come to the museum and count those scales for me. I've never been able to get to the end. Can he or she do it?
That sounds good. And I would actually like to encourage everyone who's listening right now to go to the Rattlesnake Museum when they open up, because it's a great place. Oh, and she says yes, she will come and count the scales. And I think our last question that we have on here is, what's your favorite rattlesnake and your favorite venomous snake in general and your favorite non-venomous snake?
Wow. Okay, I want everybody to write these words down and look them up later, because we don't have them all on exhibit. My favorite rattlesnake by appearance and color is the black-tailed rattlesnake. My favorite individual rattlesnake here at the museum is one right behind Lorraine and one we didn't look at before. I'll have her turn around and pan down to a lower enclosure. This is the Great Basin rattlesnake, and he's my buddy. He lived with me at home for a couple of years before he went on exhibit here. And he and I spent an awful lot of time answering emails to a lot of kids that had questions about snakes. And so I loved having him right to my left shoulder while I worked on the computer. To the next enclosure at home was an interesting green tree viper that needed to be misted every day, and I would spray some water in there, and the drips would drip down the wall. And this little guy, the Great Basin rattlesnake, with a very good feeding response, was absolutely sure that those water droplets were alive and edible. And he would follow them down the wall from top to bottom. So here he is now, and he's a good little guy. Now, my favorite venomous snake, for the way it appears, is called the Ituri forest rhinoceros viper. Ituri is I-T-U-R-I, forest, rhino or rhinoceros viper, found in the Ituri forest in Africa. And it'll just knock your socks off when you look that one up online. The colors are brilliant. Powder blue, cherry red, lemon yellow, different snakes with slightly different colors, but look that one up. For non-venomous, my favorite non-venomous snake. Wow, that's a tough one. Let's say the Brazilian rainbow boa. It's a pretty snake too. Check that one out. Brazilian rainbow boa. I've got so many favorites, it's hard to narrow it down. But I get that question a lot. And I can't get enough of looking at some of these snakes, even in pictures.
That's great. All right, we got one more question and one comment that came in. So the comment is, I think it might be Avon who said this, that my favorite snake is a cow snake and my favorite genetic mutation is the snow mutation. So that's,
okay, what was the first thing that you mentioned?
He said, or he or she, because I'm not sure who it is that's making this comment, said that their favorite snake is a cow snake. Yeah, it was Avon. His favorite snake is a cow snake, and his favorite genetic mutation is the snow mutation. So he just wanted to. Oh, Avon is a girl. I'm sorry, Avon. Oh my gosh. Okay. She wanted you to know that.
Yeah, we joke about snow snakes that we find in the snow, and they disappear because they're snow white. But there are genetic abnormal snakes known as snows, and they're missing all of their pigment. I described 3 reptile pigments. They might be missing all 3, leaving them looking either snow white or pinkish because you're seeing blood through the walls of their body. And so she knows what she's talking about. I want to hire her right away.
Okay, Avon, you've got a job when they reopen the museum. And we have one last question that says, are baby rattlesnakes more dangerous?
Yes, that's a very common misconception. Baby rattlesnakes are not more dangerous than the adults. And I'll explain that to you because we hear that all the time. And I'd say more than half the people that come in the museum believe that to be true. Here's how that works. We're going to talk about 2 specimens, the baby rattlesnake and mama rattlesnake of the same species. Babies are born alive, of course. All rattlesnakes born alive. They're born alive, and they're very defensive. If you're a baby snake, you have to be ready to defend yourself. So the baby rattlesnake is ready to strike and bite from the moment it's born. And when it does bite, if it were to bite us, it would inject venom. Sounds dangerous, and you don't want it to happen, but the baby rattlesnake has tiny little fangs, very little venom, so even a severe bite from a baby rattlesnake is pretty mild. You're not ever going to die from the bite of a baby rattlesnake. But if mom bites you, now she's older and has learned to be able to hold back the venom when she bites. We think that she's saving the venom for food getting. So she'll bite a human in self-defense and not inject venom. We call that a dry bite. And you're one of the lucky ones if you've been bitten by a rattlesnake and received a dry bite rather than an envenomation. Now, dry bites occur somewhere about 25% of the time. That can go up or down depending on the study that you read. But about 1 out of 4 bites is a dry bite. The other 3 bites are anywhere from mild to moderate to severe. And you don't know when you've been bitten by mama snake, you don't know if you've gotten a dry bite or a severe bite or somewhere in between. You always need to get that one checked out by a doctor. Now, if we compare the dry bite from mom to an envenomation from the baby, and I think that's what some people have done somewhere along the line, then they're saying, well, mom didn't inject any venom, so the baby must be more dangerous. Well, they're just not comparing the other 3 bites to the baby. And the truth of the matter, with the fangs the size of mom's fangs, it's going to be a painful bite whether it's a dry bite or not, but potentially life-threatening from mama rattlesnake and not so from the baby. Does that make sense?
I think so. It's hard to talk to the air, isn't it? and questions keep coming in. Do you need to go home? Should we do one last question?
Oh, we're in no rush.
Okay. So someone wants to know if bull snakes kill rattlesnakes.
Bull snakes?
Yeah, bull snakes. Do they kill rattlesnakes?
Yeah. Probably not. I've learned never to say never, but in general, that just doesn't happen. A lot of people think that bull snakes and rattlesnakes are arch enemies. They're not. Neither kills or considers the other one to be food in most cases, but where they come into conflict, they both have the same diets. They share the same food sources. They're competing for those foods, but not actively. They don't fight each other for the food. But where you see one snake, a rattlesnake or a bull snake, you may not see the other. You may not see another bull snake if you see a bull snake in front of you. This because they try to stay away from each other so as not to compete for the same food sources. A den full of rattlesnakes, a den is where rattlesnakes will spend their winter underground in the colder season. When the rattlesnakes come out of denning, they will start to migrate in every direction, trying to get away from each other so they're not competing. And same with the bull snakes. I have seen bull snakes and rattlesnakes coiled up together under the same piece of plywood out in the middle of nowhere. They were fine together. Maybe neither was hungry at the time, or maybe that was the only shady place where they could hide. But they don't fight with each other. They don't kill each other, nor do they mate with each other, which is another Another one of the trivia quiz comments. They do not mate. We don't produce venomous bull snakes in this country.
Good to know. All right, someone wants to know if indigo snakes are common in nature.
Yeah, there are different kinds of indigo snakes. The one that most people know is called the black variety in Florida. They get very large. It's probably the longest snake in North America, and they're snake eaters. Now, what was the question there?
Are they common
indigo?
in indigo snakes? Are they common?
Yeah, they're not uncommon. They are protected. In fact, they're federally protected. That species of snake was over-collected, and now it's hands-off entirely, unless you have proof that you have a captive-born specimen of the snake. And then there are some other indigo snakes, one that lives in southern Texas, not quite so uncommon, but I believe they're protected too. So it's like the Gila monster. The Gila monster is protected by law. You can't touch one. You can't even poke at one with a stick. Certainly can't take one home. They're protected by law, but they're not all that uncommon. We just don't see them so often. They spend a lot of time underground. But the indigo snake, a stunningly beautiful, big black snake with the iridescence, blue or purple iridescence. Hard to get over seeing one of those. It'll knock your socks off.
Neat. All right, someone wants to know how long a rattlesnake's tongue is and how big the biggest rattlesnake is.
Okay. Well, the longest tongue, rattlesnake tongue, is going to belong to the longest rattlesnake. And I would estimate the longest tongue to be maybe a couple of inches long. The longest rattlesnake on record was an eastern diamondback rattlesnake, and it attained a length of 8 feet 1 inch. There has not been another 8-foot rattlesnake recorded since that snake. We believe that to have been measured around the year 1919. Rattlesnakes that are measured after death do not count. After they die, their tissues relax, and what was a 5-foot rattlesnake may be measured at 6.5 or 7 feet long after the snake is dead. So this has to be a live measurement. It has to be confirmed by the right people. And so far, not another 8-foot rattlesnake has been found, except by my customers that come in regularly telling me about 10, 12, and 14-foot rattlesnakes. They're talking to the wrong guy if they think I'm going to believe that. But I hear it all the time.
All right. Next question is, what is the best way to handle a backcountry rattlesnake bite when medical treatment might be a day away by foot?
Okay. That's a good question, multifaceted question. First of all, I'll mention that if you're a hiker or camper, do not do that by yourself. You always want a hiking partner in case something does go wrong. It's not necessarily going to be a rattlesnake bite. You could fall and break your ankle and have a tougher time walking than you would have a tough time walking after a rattlesnake bite. Depending on the severity of the bite, like we mentioned before, you might have no problem at all. If you can't get to help within 24 hours and you survive, then you're out of the woods. It's okay. Out of the woods, hiking, camping. Anyway, you're going to be okay. Your body is taking care of that all by itself. With no treatment at all, chances of dying from a snake bite is still far less than 5%. With treatment, less than 0.1%. So if you can't walk, if you've been bitten by a rattlesnake, it's too painful for you to go on. If you've got cell phone service, call for help. If you've got your hiking partner there, have them hike out and get somebody else to come in and get you. It's not unusual for hikers to be helicoptered out. Not so often by rattlesnake bites. That happens now and then, but hikers are injured on a fairly regular basis, and they are helicoptered to help. If you don't have cell phone service, maybe your partner can climb to the top of the mountain and find service. If you're a real serious hiker or camper, you better get a serious satellite phone. That'll come in handy.
Great. All right. One more question is, do you milk the venom from any of your snakes for use in making anti-venom?
We don't do that here at the museum. There are a handful of people around the country that do that. Most of them I know very well. It's a small world among us herpetologists or biologists that make a living working with the snakes. It's a very dangerous business to be in. I work with rattlesnakes every day, but we use tools here to move them in and out of their enclosures, where the people that milk the snakes for their venom are hands-on. They have to pin the snake down, hold the snake behind the head to be able to collect that venom by coaxing the snake into biting through a membrane and losing its venom there. Those people are bitten on a fairly regular basis. A very good friend of mine passed away about 10 years ago after a lifetime of working in this business of milking snakes. He was bitten by hundreds of snakes. He only counted 183 of those bites as serious. That included king cobras and mambas and taipans and the most serious snakes of the world. That gentleman lived to be 100 years old. And he always said to me that if he lived to be 100, he'd attribute that, at least in part, to snake venom. We may find out there's a component to venom that extends our lives. We'll see. Then you'll be lined up at the Rattlesnake Museum for sure.
Well, Bob, thank you so much. This was a really fun evening. We learned a lot. We got to see snakes closer than we ever have before. So this is a fun format. And I think a lot of people are planning to make a visit to the museum as soon as you open.
Oh, that would be great. And in closing the talk, I'm going to have Lorraine come up and film one last snake. This is one of the newer snakes at the museum, a non-venomous snake, and just on that list of prettier snakes of the world. Bright green. This is the green tree python. Thank you all for taking the virtual tour tonight. I cannot wait to see you in person.
Whoa, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Bob. Someone says Rattlesnake Bob rocks. So this was really amazing. What a beautiful snake.
Lorraine's the one that rocks. She puts up with Rattlesnake Bob.
Thanks for your great camera work, Lorraine.
And here she is on camera. There she is. Yay!
All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to end the meeting. This was great. Thanks for being here. Take care. Have a good night.